Welcome to Brave Together Parenting, an empowering and truly helpful podcast for the parents of children with disabilities and all unique needs.
I've always been a spiritual person, and I've always believed that if you open your heart and you look for it, that God or whatever higher power will speak to you and will send you those signs of love. And it was a game changer. I think it gave me the power and the warmth to carry on.
Hello, brave friends. I'm your host for this episode, Jessica Patay, brave mom and the founder of the nonprofit We Are Brave Together. This is story episode 194, in which we hear a true story from a moment in the life of a caregiving parent. Following the story, we have a conversation with our storyteller that goes deeper into their experience. Today, we hear a story from Hannah Zorn, who is a mother of 2 children who each have a disability. Her story takes us to a pivotal moment in Hannah's parenting journey when her 10-month-old Addie, pre-diagnosis, was going through a lot of testing. She was desperate to know everything was going to be okay and asked for a sign. A reminder here to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, share our podcast with friends, and follow us on Instagram. And if you want to see the faces behind the podcast, look for all our episodes this season on YouTube. We thank you in advance for your support. I'll let Hannah take it from here.
In the beginning of my caregiving journey, most days were a blur. We did not have a solid diagnosis, and we were just surviving one day at a time. When I think back to those early days, however, there is one day that is so vivid and pressed into my heart and memory. It was her first endoscopy. She was 10 months old, and we were terrified. After 2 months of confused and concerned doctors, being told the possibilities from cancer, cystic fibrosis, lung failure, to interstitial lung disease, we didn't know what to expect. I'll never forget the color of the hospital gown we put my baby girl into, or the uncertainty and fear in her eyes as a nurse carried her away from me and into the OR. I'll never forget the emptiness of the waiting room or the looks on the hospital staff faces as they read her chart to check us in. The procedure itself took about an hour, but it felt like 10. I remember sitting in the waiting room with my husband and scrolling social media. I remember looking at photos of nieces and nephews, friends, all with their happy, healthy children, and wondering, will Addie ever get these moments? What would they find? Do we have days or months? Do I have years with her? How do I tell my son that his little sister is sick or that she's gone? Well, it's definitely not cancer, were the best words I have ever heard, but it hit me like a Mack truck. But we still need to investigate. We did a CT while she was under, and these scans aren't normal. There's something there. We left the hospital with some reassurance about one possibility, but mostly just more questions. Why can't they see what's wrong? If this pulmonologist doesn't know what's wrong, how bad can this get? I was spiraling. We drove back to our hotel in silence. We need to eat something and carry on for Addie, my husband said. She had been fasting for her procedure and was hangry. We decided to walk next door to a restaurant and put our name on the list. My husband realized we forgot a backup oxygen tank and ran back to the hotel while Addie and I sat there. As I was sitting with her and waiting outside, I began spiraling again. How could God do this to us? If He is real, how can He let bad things happen to children? We already lost one baby to miscarriage. Why would He take my beautiful girl away from me too? It was a dark and low feeling, and I prayed for a sign, any sign that she'd be okay. And then I saw it. Peacefully flying toward Addie and I was a large and bright orange dragonfly. He dipped and flew around us for a moment as if to say hello, and flew away. It was one of the most spiritual and beautiful moments of my life. I knew that Addie was going to survive in that moment, and I could be strong for her. I had an intense feeling of peace and reassurance. I looked around and noticed my husband walking back. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Yeah, that was wild," my husband agreed. "Where would that come from?" I told him how I had been praying hard and bargaining with God or the universe to let our baby be okay. Almost 3 years have passed since that day. We have since been given my daughter's diagnosis, neuroendocrine cell hyperplasia of infancy, the best case scenario to have when being given an interstitial lung disease diagnosis. She still utilizes oxygen and will always have fragile lungs, but her prognosis is excellent with the little that they know about her disease. She is a fighter and a bright light in this world. When we go through the rough times, much like our dragonfly, she reminds me to be strong for her. As a caregiver for a child who is medically complex, you have to find your dragonfly, whether that is faith or just pure parental love, and you have to keep flying.
We've all been there. It's so much to process as a parent when so much beyond the basics of parenting is medically out of your control. We all need hope, and I'm so glad Hannah was able to find it in the moment she's so beautifully described. And we also talk about what happens when you don't get a sign, when you are asking for it, and you just want to know that something bigger than yourself is looking out for yourself, whether you call it God or universe or source. There are times in all of our lives where we are just wanting some sort of sign that somebody out there sees us and cares. Now, please enjoy my conversation with the lovely Hannah Zorn. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to Brave Together Parenting Podcast. I'm so glad that you submitted a story for a story episode.
Thank you. Me too.
Now, are you one that typically writes? Are you journaling? Are you blogging? Are you just writing things down as you've gone through your journey?
Yeah, writing and journaling have always been healing for me and something that I've just enjoyed doing since, I was a teenager.
And so let's start by just having you share with our audience a little bit of your story and your family story.
Yeah, definitely. So we live in rural Colorado, and it's my husband, David, and I, and our two beautiful kiddos. Everett is 6 and has ADHD and a sensory processing disorder. And my little one, Adeline, is 4, and she has an interstitial lung disease called neuroendocrine cell hyperplasia of infancy. It's a mouthful, so we call it knee-high in our community. And we have been on that knee-high journey since 9 months old. So it's been a few years where we've been in it. Yeah, it's kind of how I found this. So,
and how did you come to her diagnosis? What was going on? What did you notice that wasn't quite right?
Yeah, that was the trickiest part, I think. So she was a perfectly healthy baby, and we had been through kind of the norm, and being parents to a second child, I think everyone knows you kind of breathe a little easier with all those illnesses that come up. She was actually with a friend of mine one day. It was the first day back in person after COVID that we needed to be in office for a training, and I left her with a friend who is a registered nurse of all things. And about halfway through the day, she called and said, "Hey, she's breathing really hard and has retractions." I had no idea what that meant, retractions. And,
Right.
So it was kind of like, okay, well, you're the nurse. We'll come home. And my husband came home, picked her up on the way and said, "Hey, she's acting fine. Maybe she just has some congestion or something." So finished my work day, which is always one of those things that why did I do that? Came home and she was acting completely normal. She was her happy little giggly self, 9-month-old, but something in my mom gut was just like, yeah, she's right. Something's up. She's breathing, but it's different. So dramatic. We called our on-call physician office, and it went from 0 to 60 really quick. She was like, is that her in the background breathing? She could hear it and just, not notice. I guess it was just had become normal to us. We didn't notice that she was actually like grunting. 911 call, ambulance showed up. We ended up in the hospital, and she was admitted for 3 days with what they thought was just a bad case of bronchiolitis, and sent us home. We live in the mountains, and so we're kind of a little different here than the rest of the US. Apparently this is normal. Some kids just need oxygen when they're sick, and so they're like, go home, she'll be off of it in 2 weeks and you'll be back to normal. 6 months later is when we finally got a diagnosis. I think in between all that, we had just, been going back to the pediatrician to check on that bronchiolitis. It wasn't getting better. So we earned ourselves a children's hospital referral or 5. And I think they pretty quickly realized at that 2-week mark when she wasn't getting better that something was wrong, really wrong. And it was a journey. We were up at Children's, I think, that first 6 months, I think it was 7 times that we were up there. And they honestly thought it was the worst. We tested for cystic fibrosis twice. They didn't believe the first negative result. They were convinced that she had it. They were convinced it might be cancer. We tested for that. We tested for all the different interstitial lung diseases. And we're kind of feeling like we were going crazy, honestly. It was like, oh my gosh, we're at Children's Hospital and they have no idea what's wrong,
Oh, how scary feeling.
Yeah, it was a dark time. It was kind of funny. We finally got to this one specialist. They're like, you need to see Robin Dieterding. She is the like top pulmonologist in Colorado and one of the top 3 in the United States. And we saw her, and within 5 minutes of talking to her, she looked at her CT that many other doctors had looked at and said, that is knee high. So very long story short, it was insane. It was a lot.
So from the time that you brought her in, Hannah, so she was 9 months when you had that first 911 call. How much time until you saw this amazing doctor who was able to diagnose her?
Yeah, so it was about 6 months. So I think June 2nd was the day, we'll always remember the day that we went into the hospital.
Of course.
And so it was March. I think when we finally saw Dr. Dieterding and got that diagnosis, and she had like a full the next day scope and everything, and we were finally moving in the right direction,
Right. So that's 9 months. That's a long time. And I know there are parents who go years on their diagnostic odyssey trying to figure out what is going on with their child and trying to, put it in a box or put it in a way that clarifies what's been going on. What did you do? What did you and your husband do during that time just to keep yourself going? Because it's so scary waiting for answers. It's so frustrating to either be dismissed or to have people not give us answers, and you're doing all the testing and you're jumping through all the hoops. What did you do to take care of yourself in the middle of that? Because you probably just felt like you're in fight or flight.
We were, and honestly, a lot of the time in that in between when we were trying to figure it out, I think we were in fight or flight, like full blown. I don't think I really cried or had any emotion or let that grief come to the surface until we got that diagnosis and that answer. I think it was so much of survival and not wanting to go there, not wanting to allow ourselves to think about the worst case scenarios, and probably a lot of inappropriate dark humor is kind of our toxic coping skill.
Hey, whatever gets you through, actually, I think that's okay. Thank you to everyone who showed up in person or participated virtually in our 5K fundraiser. It was a big success, and we cannot thank this community or our sponsors enough. An extra special thank you goes to our top sponsors, Rise Advocacy, GHJ Foundation, Torrance Memorial Medical Center, CMS Creative Management, the Patay family, MRM Education, Harbor Light Financial Strategies, and PPL. We are so grateful to these generous sponsors who help make all that we do for this community possible. The retreats we put on for caregiving parents, the connection circles we facilitate, and this podcast, among many more offerings, would not be possible without your support. If you or a business you know is looking to help with our next fundraiser, please go to wearebravetogether.org to find more opportunities to donate or get involved. We will be accepting donations for the 5K fundraiser through October 31st. And then we will follow that up with Giving Tuesday and end of year giving. We welcome your donations and generosity, and we thank you with all of our hearts.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we chose to do, and we still do when we travel for appointments, was I told my husband from the get-go, I will not allow this chapter of her life to be a traumatic one. I will not allow it to be something that she thinks back on and is terrified and is, oh my gosh, yeah, my family was stress ball, so doom and gloom. Every time we had an appointment, whether that was in Denver or Grand Junction, or, we were traveling for these special visits, we were like, what is something we can do? What is like a landmark we can visit or a fun thing we can take the kids to and create some normalcy? And we pushed really hard to almost make it like, we're going on all these vacations, like, awesome. Oh, and then we'll go see the doctor on the way. You do have an appointment, so we'll go see that doctor too. And you have a test, And yes, she was very young at that point and didn't quite understand everything that was happening. But I firmly believed, she is old enough to sense the stress and the depression off of her parents.
Sure.
And so we need to distract. So that was kind of how we got through. We saw a lot of things. We spent a lot of time together as family, and we made it into good memories instead of medical trauma as much as we could.
I appreciate how intentional you were, because it would be easy to throw out any creativity, any kind of, extra adventures while you're going through this. But I think that is such a wise way to approach this, and that it wasn't just going to be a history of medical trauma, but it was going to be a history of these experiences and memories together, positive, happy memories together.
Yes.
And is that advice that you would give parents who are starting out in a medical journey?
Yeah, it is. And not to understand the situation of not every family can afford that, or,
Right.
perhaps where you live, it's not something that's available. But I would say, definitely if you are traveling to one of the big hospitals, a lot of times their social work departments actually have vouchers. And so a lot of the things that we were able to do were covered by the hospital, like going to the zoo or the aquarium.
That's great.
And yeah, any children's hospital does have those resources, so I do definitely suggest it. Or Ronald McDonald houses also, they typically will have passes that you can borrow, and they're, the local zoos or aquariums or, other fun places for kiddos have an understanding that if you have this pass, you are walking in for free and you are taking a break from the medical and the stress. So 100% do it.
I did not know that there were vouchers available that you could ask a social worker at the hospital that your child is having a procedure or appointments. That's really, really good to know. So I want to talk about your story. And you had this beautiful experience with a dragonfly. And to you, it was definitely a sign.
Mm-hmm.
Take me back to that moment. Take me back to how you were feeling and what was going on, what you were thinking. Just take us back into that very moment when that happened.
Yeah, definitely. So it was the beginning, of the journey where we really had started doing all of these tests. We had passed the point of, this is no longer just bronchiolitis that she needs to heal from. This is very serious. It was our first major procedure or test, and we travel to Grand Junction for this one. We didn't have to go all the way to Denver. They were trying to lessen the blow, but it was still, I just remember like this is so bad. If we can't do this at our own local hospital, they have to bring in, this high profile pulmonologist or doctor from Denver and meet us in Grand Junction. Like, oh my goodness. And I remember another hard part of it was that it was the first time that I left my son behind with my best friend. I said, honestly, I don't know if I want him there if we find out the worst, right? This was one of the tests where they were looking into her lungs, and there was a very real possibility that they could find cancer. They could find a surfactant disorder. And so we left my son with my best friend. We drove up, and it was terrifying. It was probably, the procedure itself was, I think, only, no, it wasn't even an hour, couldn't have been. But it felt like, oh my gosh, it felt like all day. We were sitting in that waiting room, and
of course,
they did come out, and the doctor right away did say, like, I did not see any indication of a cancer. I didn't see any indication of a surfactant disorder. But that huge, but I still don't know what this is. And so it was kind of frustrating and scary still to be like, okay, we just put her under anesthesia. You were inside her lungs. Oh my gosh, we still have no idea. But the huge relief of knowing, like, okay, well, it's not cancer. It sounds like it's not, we didn't get I hate to say it, but we didn't get a death sentence today. So that's good. But just the emotions were just roller coaster. It was, okay, I want to be happy, but
absolutely.
Also, like, I can't help but feel worse, if that makes sense. And, my calm and collected husband was definitely the one that was like, okay, we need to feed her. We need to still take care of, still take care of ourselves. And so, let's go back to the hotel. We'll walk to the restaurant next door. We're sitting waiting for a table. I realized he needed to grab something from the hotel, and he walked away. And, I was sitting there with Addie and was kind of letting myself spiral, and I feel really sorry for myself and really sorry for my daughter. And I just remember in my head, it was a really dark place. I started bargaining with God, which can be a really dark place to be, of questioning your faith and questioning, like, why would you do this to me? Like, what the heck?
Right.
We had already lost our first pregnancy, and I was feeling really angry, to be honest, is the emotion. I was angry, and I was, in my mind thinking, like, how can you do this to us after all that we've already lost? Are you even there?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? Like, why? What did I do in a past life? And I think really my heart was just begging for a sign of one, that my faith that I've had up until this point was not for nothing, and that I wasn't going to lose my daughter, and that this wasn't going to be just the final blow. Honestly, I don't know. It's hard to think of that dark place, and like, can I pull through for my other kid, my husband? My heart wanted that sign so much. And I mean, I'll be darned. This, all of a sudden I look up and there's this big bright orange dragonfly flying towards us. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, really? Like, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. And it was spiritual. I remember feeling like everything else just around me got so quiet. And Addie and I were just sitting in this beautiful dragonfly, just going along and right in front of our face and kind of looping around, and then just flew away. And I've always been a spiritual person, and I've always, believed that if you open your heart and you look for it, that God or whatever higher power will speak to you and will send you those signs of love. And it was a game changer. I think it gave me the power and the warmth that, to know, like, to carry on. And my husband was walking back right at that moment. And, I thought for sure, like, oh my gosh, no one's going to believe me. Like, they're going to think I am just crazy. And, I asked him, like, please tell me you saw that. Did you see that? And he did. And he was like, yeah, it was so cool. Dragonfly. And, I told him, like, honey, I was asking for a sign that our daughter was going to be okay. And I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I think that was it. I think she's going to be okay because I saw this dragonfly. And he was like, that's great. And I don't know how much he believed it too, but I know that he knew it was important and it was what I needed to get through. And every time we had a test after that, we went up to Denver next to check for the cystic fibrosis. And then again, and all these things until we saw the doctor. And every time it was just, I would think back and be like, no, like this test is going to go good today, gosh darn it, because I know it is, because I asked for a sign and I know, and of course there's always that little piece of what if, but it was profound and it was, I'll never forget that. I wish my daughter would remember that. But
yes.
It was beautiful.
Yes. And what would you say to any of our listeners who have asked God or asked, the universe for a sign and they haven't gotten it yet? What encouragement would you share?
Absolutely. That's, that can be so tough. And I would just say if faith in religion or spirituality or, or that connection to the universe, whatever that looks like for you, is important to you in your heart, don't let go of it. I fully believe that as painful as it may be, whatever happens, I think it's important to recognize that your beautiful child has a purpose in this world and was brought here for a reason. And we all hope that reason is to stay a very long time and to be with us. But I think letting them fulfill their purpose and being able to step aside and trust that their purpose, their deal, their deal and their assignment from their higher power is between them and that higher power. And we just have the immense honor of witnessing that, whatever that may look like. And that kind of brings comfort too, to know that, well, gosh, I hope I don't lose her, but whatever time I have with her and whatever her purpose is with God is beautiful and it's profound. And to not give up, to, not question the intention or the, there is no punishment. None of us deserve punishment. None of us are being punished. I believe we're here to learn lessons and ultimately to just love as much as we can and as many people as we can in the time that we're given.
That's beautiful, Hannah. Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's not easy to get to that place because I think, we have to go through the intense grief and the why me and the why my kid and why our family, but then we can't stay there because it's not going to serve us. It's not going to serve our family. So, I applaud you for your perspective and your wisdom and your outlook. Is there anything that you would tell somebody who's just starting out?
Absolutely. I think the biggest piece, and unfortunately the piece that I didn't find or pay attention to, it was on me until much later, last year, to be honest. So we were 2 years in. You've got to find your tribe. And it can be very hard and another thing to grieve, but it is true that your current tribe, your friends, your family may not be the tribe that you need to go on this journey of a disability or of an illness with your child, and to be open to making some of the best friends of your life with this journey. And be prepared to have complete strangers become family overnight because of the grief and the journey and the joys and the accomplishments that you share. Find the support groups, join the Facebook groups that are specific to your kiddo's disability. There's something so powerful about seeing a family in Melbourne, Australia that has a child with the same things going on and they're across the world, but you still have that connection and it's beautiful and you feel more heard and you feel less alone. And, find the parent groups, find, We Are Brave Together, listen to the podcasts and know that you are so far from being alone. And it's okay if your friends, and your parents or your siblings don't quite understand what you're going through. And it's okay to still love them and have that relationship with them. But if you can find your people that really get it and also form bonds with them, I'm telling you, it is a game changer. It is so, so good.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Definitely.
I agree. You're preaching to the choir. I absolutely, we could not do this journey without our people who get it and who we bond with over the crazy and the scary and the worry and the wonder and the beauty and the really hard days.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so critical. So critical. Well, Hannah, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being willing to come on the podcast to talk about that. And I wish you and your family the best. And I hope when I get to Colorado someday that I get to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the space to blab for so long.
Yes, but what you said, there's something in what I believe every guest shares from their life, from their story, that is going to resonate with many, many, many. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. Do us a favor and leave us a review and a rating so that this podcast can get into the ears and the hearts of more and more moms. Did you know that Brave Together Parenting Podcast is an extension of our nonprofit organization, We Are Brave Together? We Are Brave Together serves an international community of caregiving moms, offering support groups that are virtual and in-person, educational resources, and low-cost weekend retreats. And we have published our first anthology of caregiving stories entitled Becoming Brave Together, Heroic, Extraordinary Caregiving Stories from Mothers Hidden in Plain Sight. It will encourage and validate every parent caregiver. To join us today, go to wearebravetogether.org. Our support and sisterhood awaits you. Brave Together Parenting Podcast is for entertainment and education purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional care and should not be relied on for medical or mental health advice. The use of any content on our podcast, links, show notes, or on our website is to be done at your own personal risk. Please seek out a professional to assess your own medical or mental health concerns because we are all beautifully complex and the content of this podcast is for a broad audience.